The veil of routine. Elena Carter stared at the empty chair across the dining table. The silverware gleamed in the low light. The untouched glass of wine reflected the chandelier above, and the silence pressed in around her. Michael was late again. His work had become a reliable excuse, a shield against the intimacy they had once shared. She tried to remember the last time they had laughed together, but the memory felt like a faint echo from another life. She gathered the plates with mechanical precision, placing them into the dishwasher without really seeing them. Every night followed the same script. She waited, she hoped, and she went to bed alone. Her friends insisted she was lucky, married to a successful man, living in a house that most would envy, but what did a polished floor matter when her heart was worn bare? It was her mother's call that finally drew her away from the suffocating rhythm. The family ranch in Willow Creek needed oversight. The workers were reliable, but paperwork and small repairs had piled up. Michael encouraged her to go, not out of concern, but convenience. "It'll keep you busy," he had said, already scanning his phone. The journey took her hours, winding roads that bled into vast fields. The scent of open air filled her lungs, sharp and clean, so unlike the stale perfume of the city. When she arrived, the ranch looked the same, wooden fences weathered by sun, horses grazing lazily, and the barn standing like a sentinel of the past. That was where she met him. Daniel Hayes emerged from the barn, tall and dusted with earth, his shirt clinging with the day's labor. His presence was quiet, unhurried, yet commanding in its simplicity. He removed his hat when he greeted her, his voice carrying the warmth of someone who lived by the land. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his eyes meeting hers without hesitation. "Your mother mentioned you be visiting. I'll show you what needs attention." "Please, call me Elena," she replied, surprised at how quickly her voice softened in his presence. They walked the perimeter together, Daniel pointing out repairs needed along the fence line. Elena listened, nodding, though her mind drifted toward the steadiness in his tone, the way he spoke without rushing, without checking a phone every few seconds. He seemed present, something Michael never was anymore. That evening, after Daniel returned to his chores, Elena stood alone by the corral. The horses moved gracefully, their muscles taut beneath their coats. One of them approached the fence, nudging her hand. She laughed softly, a sound she had almost forgotten she could make. When she returned to the ranch house, her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "Long day. Don't wait up. Nothing more. No warmth. No question of how she was." She set the phone down, staring at it, as if it might transform into something meaningful. But it remained as cold as his absence. The next day, Daniel found her struggling with a gate latch. He came up beside her, his hand brushing hers as he showed her the trick to loosening the mechanism. The touch was fleeting, innocent, yet it sent a current through her. She pulled back, cheeks warming, but Daniel only smiled politely, as though unaware of the effect he had stirred. Through the afternoon, they spoke in fragments. She learned he had managed the ranch for years, that he preferred the honesty of hard work over the noise of cities. He asked her about her life in town, and she offered the simplest version, busy, quiet. The truth, that she was lonely in her marriage, hung unspoken in the space between them. That night, Elena sat by the fire in the ranch house, the crackle of wood filling the silence. Her phone remained blank. Michael hadn't called. She thought of Daniel's steady gaze, the way he had listened when she spoke, and shame prickled at her skin. It was wrong to feel this alive because of another man. And yet, as the firelight danced across the walls, she could not deny the truth forming within her. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Elena rose from her chair, extinguished the lamp, and moved toward the staircase. She paused at the bottom step, torn between the comfort of old vows and the dangerous promise of something new. The house creaked in the silence, carrying her uncertainty into the shadows. Upstairs, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come easily. The echo of Daniel's voice lingered in her ears, blending with Michael's absence until the lines between loyalty and longing blurred. The ranch had offered her space to breathe, but had also placed her on the edge of something she could not yet name. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The whisper of desire. Morning sunlight spilled across the ranch, gilding the fields with a glow Elena hadn't seen in years. She woke early, restless, drawn to the window as if the open land itself had called her. In the distance, Daniel was already at work, shoulders bent as he adjusted the fence posts. His movements were steady, deliberate, nothing hurried. It was a rhythm born of routine, yet there was something compelling in the way he seemed fully alive within it. She dressed simply, choosing an old shirt and jeans she had not worn in months. In the city, her attire was always polished, curated for business dinners and social functions where her role was to smile beside Michael. Here, comfort felt like permission, to be herself without performance. When she stepped outside, Daniel glanced up from his work. A brief nod, a half smile, and then he returned to the fence. She walked toward him, the crunch of gravel beneath her boots betraying her presence before her voice could. "Need another pair of hands?" she asked. He looked at her carefully, as though measuring whether the offer was genuine. Then he gestured toward a coil of wire. "If you don't mind holding that steady." Their hands met briefly as he passed her the tools. The contact was fleeting, yet her pulse quickened, betraying her own secret. She steadied the wire as instructed, but her focus wavered, her thoughts spiraling toward questions she could not ask. They worked in silence for a time, the quiet broken only by the sound of metal against wood. Eventually, Daniel spoke, his voice even but tinged with curiosity. "You grew up here, didn't you?" "Yes," Elena replied, eyes on the fence. "Though I left when I was 18. I thought I wanted the city, the opportunities, all of it." "And did you find what you were looking for?" The question lingered between them. Elena tightened her grip on the wire, swallowing the answer she feared would sound too much like a confession. "I found stability," she said at last. Daniel nodded, though the subtle crease in his brow suggested he had heard what she didn't say. By midday, they were both dusty, sweat marking their shirts. Daniel leaned against the fence, pulling off his hat to wipe his brow. "You've done good work," he said simply. She laughed, a sound unguarded. "I'm not sure you'd call it good, but I tried." His eyes caught hers then, and for a moment the world felt still. There was no city, no marriage, no expectations, only the unspoken current flowing between them. Elena looked away first, gathering her tools. The air felt heavier than before, weighted with something unnamed. Later that evening, rain swept across the ranch, drumming against the roof in steady rhythm. The power flickered once, then steadied. Elena lit a fire in the living room, its warmth pushing back the storm's chill. She wrapped herself in a blanket, settling into the armchair with a book she could not bring herself to read. A knock at the door startled her. She rose, pulling the blanket tighter, and opened it to find Daniel standing there, rainwater dripping from his coat. "Sorry to bother you," he said, voice low. "The storm knocked a branch onto the barn roof. Thought you'd want to know." She nodded quickly, though her pulse thudded. "Of course. Thank you." For a moment, neither moved. The firelight behind her cast a warm glow, while the storm framed him in shadow. It felt like two worlds colliding, the safety of the home and the wild pull of the night. "You should dry off," she said, stepping aside without quite meaning to. Daniel hesitated, then entered. The scent of rain and earth clung to him, filling the room with something raw, untamed. He removed his coat, draping it over a chair, and glanced toward the fire. They sat opposite each other, the silence louder than any conversation. Elena's fingers tightened around the blanket. She wanted to speak, to fill the air with something harmless, but her voice refused to form the words. Daniel finally broke the silence. "You seem lonely here." Her throat tightened. "I'm married." "I know," he said, his gaze steady. "That doesn't mean you aren't lonely." The truth of it stung. She wanted to deny it, but the words dissolved before they could form. The fire crackled, filling the space between them. Elena pulled the blanket tighter, whispering more to herself than to him. "Please, don't remove the cloth." Daniel's eyes flickered, searching her face. He didn't move, didn't push, but the weight of her words hung between them like a fragile thread. The storm raged outside, Yet inside the house, a different kind of storm gathered. Neither spoke again, but both knew the silence was only temporary. And when Daniel finally rose to leave, Elena's heart ached, not with relief, but with the hunger of unfinished longing. The breaking point. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the fields washed clean, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Elena stood at the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the land. The night replayed in her mind. Daniel's words, the silence, the way her own whisper had betrayed her. Please don't remove the cloth. She had spoken out of fear, but fear of what? The boundary itself, or the possibility she might want to cross. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Michael, delayed in Denver. Back Friday. No question about how she was, no mention of missing her. Just information, sterile and final. She closed the phone with a quiet snap, her chest tightening with an ache that no explanation could soften. That afternoon, she found Daniel near the stables, mending a saddle strap. His head lifted when she approached, but he said nothing, waiting. She forced a smile. I wanted to thank you for last night, for being considerate. His gaze held hers. I only did what was right. The words cut deeper than she expected. Right? The boundary still stood, but it felt fragile now, worn thin by unspoken desire. She should have walked away, yet she lingered, her hand brushing the wood of the stable door as though anchoring herself. Do you ever wonder, she asked softly, what it would be like to choose differently, to live another life? Daniel's hands stilled on the strap. He looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Every day, he said. The air thickened between them. Elena's chest rose and fell, breath shallow. She wanted to flee, to bury the question and the answer with it. Instead, she stepped closer, drawn by something stronger than reason. By evening, the weight of the day clung to her. She lit the fire again, the room glowing with amber warmth. A knock came at the door, soft, almost hesitant. Her heart knew before her ears confirmed. Daniel stood there, not in rain this time, but in silence. His presence filled the doorway, a question unspoken. She should have sent him away. She should have closed the door and locked it. Instead, she stepped aside. He entered, setting his hat on the table. They said nothing as he joined her near the fire. The glow cast shifting shadows across his face, outlining the hesitation in his jaw, the restraint in his eyes. Elena, he began, voice low, if I stay. You shouldn't, she cut in quickly. Her fingers clutched the edge of the blanket. But I don't want you to leave. The confession fractured something inside her. She felt both liberated and undone. Daniel moved closer, slow enough to give her time to stop him. She didn't. His hand brushed her cheek, rough from work yet tender in its touch. She closed her eyes, leaning into it despite the guilt rising like fire in her chest. Their lips met, tentative at first, then urgent, as though years of longing had found a single outlet. The kiss deepened, and the blanket slipped from her shoulders. She gasped, whispering again, almost pleading, please don't remove the cloth. But Daniel did, and when his eyes met hers, he froze, not from regret, but from the realization of the line they had crossed together. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hesitate with him. Then the moment carried them both forward. The fire crackled, the storm outside long gone, but inside another storm raged, passion entwined with guilt, desire bound with betrayal. Elena felt alive in a way she had not in years. Yet each heartbeat carried the echo of a vow she had broken. When it was over, she lay beside the fire, her breath uneven, her mind torn. Daniel sat apart, head bowed, as if the weight of what had happened pressed on him more than the labor of any field. This can't happen again, she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't look at her. You're right. But both of them knew the truth. Once crossed, some lines could never be redrawn. Elena pulled the blanket back around her shoulders, covering herself as though the cloth could erase what had passed. She stared into the flames, each flicker a reminder that choices burn long after they're made. And though she longed for peace, she knew the fire inside her would not let her rest. The reckoning, the days that followed blurred together. Yet Elena carried each one with the weight of a secret she could not set down. She moved through the ranch like a shadow, smiling when spoken to, laughing at small moments. But inside, she felt fractured. Every glance at Daniel held the memory of what they had done. Every silence between them whispered the truth they dared not name. On Thursday evening, her phone chimed with a message. Home tomorrow. Can't wait to see you. Michael. Elena read the words over and over, searching for something more. But there was nothing beneath the surface. No warmth, no tenderness. Still, the timing struck like a hammer. Michael was returning, and with him, the life she was meant to live. When Friday came, the hum of a car engine echoed along the gravel drive. Elena stood on the porch, her pulse racing as Michael stepped out. He looked tired, his suit wrinkled from travel, his phone already in his hand. He smiled faintly when he saw her, though his eyes seemed to skim past rather than rest upon her. Elena, he said, embracing her with the efficiency of habit. You look well. She returned the embrace, stiff, the scent of cologne masking his absence. For a moment, she wished desperately that his arms might hold her the way Daniel's had. But the thought burned with shame as quickly as it came. Inside, Michael set his bags down and began speaking of meetings, contracts, delays. His voice was steady, businesslike, a rhythm she knew too well. She nodded at the right moments, but her attention faltered when Daniel's silhouette crossed the window outside. Michael noticed. Who's that? The rancher, she answered quickly. Daniel Hayes. He manages the land. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. You been spending time with him? Elena forced a smile. He's been helping with repairs. Nothing more. The words tasted bitter, half a lie, half a truth. Michael accepted them without comment, but the glance he cast her way lingered. That evening, the three of them crossed paths near the barn. Michael extended a hand toward Daniel, firm, practiced. Thank you for looking after things. My wife speaks highly of you. Daniel shook his hand, his own gaze steady, but Elena felt the charge between them, an invisible current Michael could not miss. Her breath caught, fearing the silence might betray her more loudly than any confession. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael drew Elena aside. Something's different about you, he said quietly. She met his gaze, heart pounding. Is that a bad thing? He studied her, searching for an answer she could not give. At last, he shook his head. No, just different. The words clung to her long after they returned inside. That night, lying in bed beside her husband, Elena stared into the darkness, listening to the sound of his even breathing. The memory of Daniel's touch haunted her, sharper now in its absence. In the silence, she realized the central truth. She could not return to who she had been before. The line had been crossed, and though the world appeared unchanged, she was no longer the same woman Michael thought he knew. The next morning, Elena walked out to the corral alone. Daniel was there, tightening the gate. He looked up when she approached, his eyes heavy with restraint. This is goodbye, isn't it? He asked. She swallowed hard. It has to be. For a moment, neither moved. The horses stirred restlessly, the morning wind carrying the scent of hay and earth. Elena wanted to reach for him, to undo her words, but the weight of her vow pulled her back. Daniel gave a single nod, as though sealing the decision. Take care of yourself, Elena. She turned away before her resolve could break, each step heavy, final. Back inside, Michael waited at the table with a cup of coffee, glancing up from his phone. Where were you? He asked. Just outside, she answered. Her voice was steady, though her heart trembled. He smiled faintly, returning to his screen. To him, life was unchanged. To her, everything had shifted. Elena sat across from him, the warmth of the mug seeping into her hands. She stared into the dark liquid, her reflection fractured in the surface. Somewhere within her, a voice whispered that truths, once born, could never be buried again. She lifted the cup, drank deeply, and let the silence settle between them like a secret neither would name.